Thank you so much for joining this talk. So I'm sure I'm in between your lunch and talking about some of the technologies. So please feel free to ask questions. Feel free to interrupt. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. So before we get started, I just want to get a quick recap of how many people know about mesh or data mesh. Raise your hand. Oh, wow, that's quite a lot. I thought not many people heard about it. So then, in that sense, I'll quickly jump into that. So I'll talk about a little bit introduction of why we went into mesh. Why not we went to some data lakes or some other technologies. I'll also talk about the unique way we look into what is called data as a product. Most of the time, you might have seen people take data as a static set of files, run algorithms, and get a given outcome. The third thing, I'll talk about how to maximize the value of the data, not only by just looking at the inside, but connecting each products together. So we'll look into a couple of examples, how we do that, and what is the power of that, especially for healthcare life sciences. And the last topic I'll talk about is how we are trying to build an AI-based platform. I'll talk about a little bit of regenerative AI. As you know, this field, life science, genomics is text data. At the end, you'll see it starts with PCR, but after primary and secondary and tertiary analysis, you get a text data, right? So there is a huge evolution of generative nature of the text. So we'll talk about a little bit what we are doing in that field and how we can help for the cause. Like I said, feel free to ask questions. So a quick recap. If you look at life science, I'm sure you have seen this plot. You start with R&D, but you start with clinical trial phase 1. It's roughly tens of patients. Then phase 2 is roughly about hundreds to thousands. Phase 3 and phase 4 starts becoming large number of customers. But not only that, but data increases enormously. And the important aspect is you need to track it down again in a given cycle, even if it's FDA approved or not. So according to statistics, that out of about 5,000 drug candidates, only one results in commercial products. But the data still has value, even if it didn't pass a given clinical trial, FDA approval and things like that. And each trial, give and take, is of the order of $900 million. So what is the best way we can utilize the current trial, but also the old trials, which may not have given the results you need, or across trials? And what are the technology one can use? So I'll step back a little bit. One of the old technology people use a lot for a long time, since 40 years, is what we call data warehouse. And it was successful. It's really successful. It coupled the compute and storage. Many of the retail industries used to have run it under the desk. It had metadata layer. It had a data model, an abstraction of in the data warehouse. It had data lineage and things like that. But it had a couple of limitations. And one of the limitations is AI/ML introduces iterative algorithms, and they are not very much SQL friendly. You don't get a data frame kind of approach there. So people moved on, and you might have heard about data lakes then. So data lakes actually gave the promise is a collection of all the different kind of data found in the organization. It has become the place where enterprise generally offloaded their data sets. It gave the promise of low-cost storage. It supported open file format like Parquet and so many things. But apart from the promise, it had few issues. One is no support for transactions. There was no enforcement on a given policy. So people moved on to what you might have heard, combine the two. Why not? So Lakehouse. So Lakehouse approach started becoming more popular in many organizations we have seen. It also has limitations in terms of domain centricity. It had limitations of ownership. So looking forward, one of the ways to solve it is we looked into what we call data mesh, right? So data mesh essentially is not a centralized mechanism. All the data warehouse is centralized. Data lake is centralized, but data mesh is essentially a distributed mechanism and is a decentralized architecture. So it promises a couple of things. You might have seen this study from Zhamak and many others, that it promises to build domain centricity embedded into the architecture. It should have self-infrastructure as a platform. It has a product-like thinking approach. It was supposed to be a paradigm shift, but how do you implement it? So we started looking into it to build something which is distributed, which is domain-centric, can be useful, and can be reusable. So what we did is we started looking at a fundamental unit. In this case, we started thinking data as a product. So essentially, you take a set of static files, build into a product. So you'll say, what is data product? So data product in this case represents a harmonized, decentralized application layer on top of disparate data sources, along with employing a universal APIs. They represent a clean and standardized model. This way, you not only get your structured information, but you also can have unstructured modeling. So it has three important components. So one important component is you have a data mapping layer. You have baked-in algorithms, so you can bring your machine learning algorithm and bake it inside it, and it is served by an API layer. So that became a single unit. And since it's a single harmonized unit, you can talk to each other because the application is no longer a static file. And thus, you can do a fast analysis because it embeds a in-memory model. It's easy to integrate like different kind of data sets. It becomes a multimodal data. And it is extendable and user interoperable using API. So to use that, we have seen in life sciences, how do people use it is we have a set of team called data engineers. They take the data from the lakes or lake houses and all. They build what we call data products. Then we engage with data scientists. Typically, data scientists will not go and build a model for your data model. They write Python or R-based applications. So we created an interface that you can actually embed R and other apps inside it. And then researchers can use low-code application, click through it, and get their results. It has an inbuilt cohort builder. So the first layer, we map to almost everything, like key value pairs, Spark, SQL, CSV, you name it. The algorithm layer, we provide certain algorithm baked into it, but you can bring your own algorithm as well. And the third layer, which serves, is the API layer that serves both the analysis platform, so we have a given analysis platform, and a notebook system where you train or use for developing the models. So data product, we typically build in 4 stages. Take the data, create a harmonized model with the input data sets. We help you do that. The system allows you to do that. You build and deploy data products and using an automatic CI/CD process inside it. And then researchers and AI ML scientists build the apps respective for their study. So this allows us to ingest, integrate a model with a wide variety of tabular, but also unstructured data. So this is the CI/CD pipelines. Once you upload your code, not your data, it automatically starts building it. We run it, almost on all cloud, AWS, Microsoft, and Google. It's based on Kubernetes and built-in microservices. So essentially, how we change things is you can think of that as you can adding a data mapping layer, you're adding a model and algorithm as a unit, and then you're interrogating via the UI as an analysis or analysis app to get some certain results. So one of the beauty is that once you do that, you can actually interrogate to each unit itself. Like, for example, if you have a clinical trial 1, you can ask a question. What is the primary endpoints? What are the secondary endpoints? What are the research we are doing here? But also you can connect to each other and ask questions like, what was the clinical trial? How much it cost? And what are the side effects out there? So you can start talking to different data products simply because the application layer, it allows you to do that. Plus also it's distributed. That means you can run in any cloud. One of the things we have seen in life sciences is a lot of people do analysis which are really project-based. So once the project is done, it's really hard to find where it is. So in TagBio, we build a model such that it's connected to a search and discovery platform. So when you say TCGA, you actually get to the data product. You also, since it's a harmonized layer, you're getting a three-dimensional on-code data frame such that you can interrogate using your ML model. I'll show you a couple of examples later on. And you can ingest this almost from anywhere, like SQL layer, CSV, Amazon S3, it's a block storage, data lakes, and so on and so forth. We also allow a set of single SSO authorization with respective authorization and authentication, and a granular control of each data product by the owner. So even if you're authorized, unless the owner allows you, you cannot see it. So for example, if you look at a given deployment, you will see something like that. You'll see, number one, this is a public clinical trial, so that's why I showed you. It's catalyzed by Pfizer phase 3 clinical trial, Roche phase 2 clinical trials, or clinicaltrial.gov. And once you click at that, you will get something like, what are your primary and secondary protocols are there? How do I do UMAP clustering? How do I study Cox survival, for example, interrogating the data? So this follows, as you can say, you can find it, you can access it, you can reuse it. It's interoperable, but since it's a harmonized data model itself, so you can interoperate it, and it's reusable. We also have fine-grained control. For example, if you look into this particular data product, you can make one data product public within your organization. So remember we deploy within the clients or customers' infrastructure, right? So it's within your infrastructure, not somewhere outside. So you can find it within that. If you make it public, which means it's public within the organizations, you can make it private with control to only 3 people, for example. In this example, I showed the single cell data product is currently, can be seen by only 3 people. So what are the use cases? Let me give you a couple of examples. Please come to our booth. We have a booth at 712. We'll show you a couple of demos, but so here are a couple of use cases. So it is used by pharmaceutical industries for example, ClinOps, harmonizing clinical trial. One of the life science pharmaceutical industry is actually making a standardized clinical trial. Do you know that? So you have a clinical trial and standardize the format such that it goes through a much simpler processing layer. To study real-world evidence, adverse effect, health economics, some examples I'll give, an outcome, disproportionate analysis, safety studies and all, currently deployed at these centers, and we're slowly growing into it. I'll give you one example. This is an example of renal cell carcinoma. This is a typical kidney kind of cancer. It happens in many people. It's a fast-growing cancer and often spreads in lungs and other organisms. One of the ways to detect is to study what we call biomarker analysis. And there is one protein, it's called PD-L1 protein or PDL protein. It's kind of protein which acts like a brake into your immune system. So if you can measure that PDL protein as a function of your drug choice, you can actually say what is your survival rates are. And this is what was published in Nature. And since the data is harmonized, it has a cohort builder, you can actually reproduce it, actually clicking at that particular link. It took several years to study that. It's really painful. But given the harmonization, baked-in algorithm, and API layer, you can reproduce the same study within 5 or 10 minutes. We'll show you a demo if you come to our booth. Also, you can study UMAP clustering. For example, I have no idea which particular set of biomarker or exome mutated, right? So you can do a unsupervised learning and clusterize it, and then start digging deeper into any of the cancer type or any of the gene expression which are clusterized here. So this is a TCGA example. We call it a public data set we provided. We also are useful for healthcare. So for example, UCSF, Value Improvement, uses us to study inpatient and outpatient billing data. For example, EMR data sets, Visant comparative data. We are also being used by nonprofit organizations like Parkinson's Foundation. We recently made a partnership with them where we map clinically relevant Parkinson's gene with the clinical information itself. So in our data model, for example, there are thousands of clinical variables. How many times you went to the doctor? What are the test scores are? What did they say? Imagine your x-axis is number of patients, and y-axis is the parameters like the clinical relevant parameters, doctor's visit and all. In this model, you have a z-axis, which is the variance information for that particular person. So now you can clusterize it, say, okay, this particular variant is causing, let's say, Parkinson's disease. We'll show you some demo, at least some of the public ones, where you can actually identify a given expression, a clusterization expression responsible for Parkinson's disease. But again, this is a study in progress with Parkinson Foundation. So up to this point, what we did is we looked into one data product itself, right, and derived information using various methods. Can I combine it? So one of the way we allow it to combine is via API method, which has built-in gatekeeper. So essentially, you have a URL with the API gateway, and you have a token. You can ask a question, and you get an answer. It's a standard API technique. API is widely useful, as you know. Google started it by putting API method on top of Google Maps long time ago. Stripe did it on financial data. So it's widely popular, and it's highly scalable system. So one of the beauty of these data products as a unit is that it publishes itself. For example, in this case, it tells you what is my commit versions are, what is my entry count, who is my owner is, what is the algorithm version, what is the data versions, what are the model versions, what's the name, what can be used as a tag, like training or machine learning. And you can publish that JSON payload to your organization's search and discovery platform if you have one, or you can use our platform as a search and discovery tools. So in a mesh, you are allowed to actually combine data products, right? So you can actually imagine a set of hospital system. And a question I want to ask that, how many people have diabetics in Massachusetts as a hospital system, and maybe in San Francisco, right? You go to any system, what you have to do is you have to kind of take both the data and combine it and figure it out how many people have diabetics there. In our way, you're actually, and neither Massachusetts nor California is allowing you to get the data at a single place. In this way, what you are doing is you are executing at the respective place because it's an application layer connected to a resource. So you can execute that study. You can also do sharing. We enable, for example, sharing of analytics, not the physical data, for real-world evidence and other studies. So let me show you one example of how powerful it is. So let's take 3 data products. One is called clinical trial, other is adverse effect, and third is health outcomes. And this is a public example of Regeneron. So as you know, Regeneron has 3 major market product, Eylea, Dupixent, Libtayo, and others. This is from the investor slides. And one of the indications are, let's say, atopic dermatitis, right? So you can ask the data product 1, what are the top 3? You can get a market intelligence. What are the top 3, let's say, drug this particular pharmaceutical industry is creating? And this data product is not about Regeneron, any drug companies, right? You can get those top 3. You can select from one of that what is the major indication, and then ask how much it costs to have, let's say, atopic dermatitis. It's something like you might have done many times in Yelp. You say, what are the top 5 restaurants close to me? And out of those top 5 restaurants, which one is, at least me, look for Indian restaurant, for example. I like Indian food. And out of that Indian food, which menus are interesting to me? And here you're doing it without doing any learning. You're just harmonizing the data, baked in algorithm asking these 3 questions. So here is one of the answers. So you asked, again, this is a public source information. So you say, okay, I select Dupixent, right? What are the major drugs from Regeneron, and what are the indications? As you can see, y-axis talks you about the indication, and x-axis is the number of the report. As you see, the top one is actually atopic dermatitis, that's one of the major indication which is treated using Dupixent. So there are also respective for Eylea and others, right? Then you ask the third data product, this one. What is the typical cost of that? As you can see, the middle layer will tell you the cost is of the order of $6,000 and all. So this is a published study, so that's what I'm showing you. So can we enlarge this one? And this because you're actually connecting multiple data products. Again, each running by itself can give you information, but connecting by them just using 3 clicks, you get much more power about those studies than individually. So since it's harmonized, now you can connect it. Can we do something more than that? So this brings me to AI and machine learning. So we also started building out mechanisms such that people can build their own model using these data products. So you can get these harmonized data products, which is application layer, but you can connect to your personal data in here. We also have a developer studio where you're connecting these 2 data product. You can bring your own algorithm, but also you can use Amazon SageMaker. We have a mechanism to connect to Amazon SageMaker or Azure Machine Learning Services, or even Vertex AI. Or bring your own algorithms. We allow you to bring your own container-based algorithms. And then once you build the data product, then you can interrogate using app, the same API layer we discussed about it, and then you can get your own results. Here is one example. For example, you can write a single Jupyter Notebook job, submit it now or submit it later. This uses Jupyter Hub. And then here is a KNN trained on one of the data sets for flowers, actually. This, as we go into this machine learning model, you can imagine you cannot ignore the power of generative nature of AI. And one of the important part of the generative AI, ChatGPT is one of the application of that, is that not only it can understand the details, but also it can generate you different text. As I've said, genomics or variant information, VCF files are all text-based system. So in order to do these kind of generative technologies, you have to get a public model, a foundational model, GPT-3 or GPT-4. You have to couple that, or Bloom. Bloom is actually a really good foundational model done by French scientists. It's a bit more open. So you take a foundational model, if it is LLMA is another one by Facebook, and then combine it with your private data, like clinical trial we talked about, like health economics we talked about, like few other data sets which has personal information. Then you build your own modeling by what is a mechanism called fine-tuning. So there are 3 ways to do fine-tuning. The one way we call it is additive. So additive way is in a way like you might have done in ChatGPTs, where you say, tell me or build me a stack with book, computer, needle, and egg, and create me a pyramid, right? So that's actually, you're doing what we call prompt engineering. But the other ways to do that is soft tuning, in-context learning. You can also do reparameterization, hybrid fine-tuning. There are many, many mechanisms out there. So we allow you all of that in our platform so that people can build their own model using their own personal data like clinical trials or health economics and any other data sets. And can get their own feedback. They don't have to share their information with anyone else. So this way you can have multiple set of organizations that started doing that. I cannot name them, but they starting to build it. Here is one public example I give it to you. So if you this is again from public records. So if you feed these kind of text, here is one example, which is an example of prompt engineering. So here you feed the text like, our 4th quarter performance was remarkably high at Regeneron and is highlighted by significant achievement. And then you ask a question like, summarize the text limited by triple brackets. And you can see in 3 lines it's summarized here. May not be the best summary, but it's the summary, right? Now you can ask a question where you can avoid hallucinations, right? So very pinpoint questions like, for example, how many total addressable population increased in Regeneron in 2022? And there it says 225,000. So prompt engineering allows you to be more specific, but that's not the only way to do that. The other ways we talked about, for example, is do what we call additive or adapters, where you're removing a couple of layers and adding those layers with your data. We plan to provide multiple notebooks in our system so that you can take adapter model and tune to your data. One of the complexities is that you have to be careful that you have to use, if you're GPT-4 is a commercial model. I don't know how much people are comfortable in sending their own data to GPT-4, but you can get things like LLMA for research and development. So we'll provide multiple notebooks such that you can do adaptive training of your personal data and keep your personal model. We have two kinds of registry. One is the public registry and a private registry. Private is private to your organizations. Public you can share with anyone. We allow soft prompt language training, like prompt engineering we talked about. We'll also provide certain notebook in order to do selective, efficient fine-tuning. Please note, when you do efficient fine-tuning, one of the key is less parameter, right? But you're inheriting big parameters from these large models. So you have to be careful about how much GPUs you're using. And also once you have the outcome, please be responsible. Be careful not to use it for any other purposes. So the platform will give you a couple of examples. We'll give you a couple of notebooks such that you can use that as a template to train your own data. We are also working on low-code mechanisms such that you can click through your ways by submitting your data and also adding a public model to it. So essentially, TagBio helps customers to fine-tune or retrain or build a generative AI models with private biomedical data as data products. And one of the easier point is that these are harmonized data layer, right? So you don't have to clean it up. You don't have to do duplicate removal. You don't have to look into NAN and things like that. These are already harmonized data sets in the system. And one of the key area is that will ensure the privacy, ownership, and governance. I think, so today we talked about data product, we talked about interconnected data product, what is the power of that? We also talked about a little bit about the data analysis and management, both clicker side and the coder side. We are available, or people can get TagBio platform from AWS or Microsoft Marketplace. We're trying to get into adding the platform into Google Marketplace also. So you can these are the links you can do. Many people like to kind of try it out, so please try out. We have a site in which you can try out for free. You can register it or tagbio/try. And I think you can also come to our booth and we will give you demo related to both precision medicine that can combining clinical with omics variables. We can also give you examples of a few examples of generative AI or simple model training and things like that. Thank you, and let me know if you have any questions.
Show of hands if you have a question.
Hello, my name is Bharti, and I have a question about your data product. How do you define the data product? Because it could be way bigger and also can be very narrow data set that's not fit.
That's true. So data product, when we say, is actually consists of 3 layers I talked about, right? So your data mapping layer, you have algorithm, and the API layer combined together. That's a data product with a given data model. Let me show you. But it's a good question. So where are we? Data is no longer a static set of files in any given storage, right? So you have one second. Sometimes in the screen, it takes a long time to go back. Almost there. So when we say data product, it has data mapping layer, data model, and the algorithms. Huh? So in this one, it's more clear here. Those are the 3 layers we use, and that's the unit of a data product.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah.
Final call. All right, well, Dr. Patti, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation and for lunch. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.